I now call on Stuart Stevenson, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's quite clear there's a large number of people in this chamber who agree that tolls must go. And that, of course, is what the abolition of bridge tolls at Scotland Bill delivers. I was brought up in Fife, spent the first 20 plus years of my life there, and therefore it is of some considerable pleasure to see this happen. Indeed, I crossed the Forth Bridge on the first day of its opening. Perhaps I will get the pleasure of crossing on the first day that it's free to do so as well. Members have raised a number of issues throughout the debate, and I will try in the time available to cover as many as possible. The first one that I might deal with on the issue of the modelling of traffic, it is precisely a model that we are talking about. It may be that reality will converge with the model and show it to be 100% accurate, but it may equally diverge. Models are merely estimates. Reality we will, of course, engage in. Patrick and indeed Des McNulty, briefly.
The reason why I seek to intervene at this particular point in the Minister's speech is that those of us who use the bridge regularly are aware that the opening of the A8000 in itself has made a significant contribution to congestion and to flow rates on the bridge. Will the Minister ensure that any analysis that's done as a result of the removal of tolls on the bridge takes into account the fact that some of that change may not be due to the toll removal and may actually be due to the opening of the A8000?
The member makes a reasonable point. There's certainly no longer the backing up of traffic as it went on to the 8000, now going on to the M9 extension. Nonetheless, we don't anticipate that the capacity at the peak hour of the crossing will be materially different. So we can't leave that as an excuse to fail to engage in the consequences that may derive from abolition of tolls. As I was going to say, Patrick and Des McNulty quite properly focused on the CO2 impacts of abolishing the tolls. Des used the figure 9,000 tonnes a year, others have used 8,000. It's worth saying, of course, that it's been suggested that the climate change conference in Bali cost 47,000 tonnes of CO2. And therefore, it's what you do with your CO2 expenditure that is the important thing, as well as, of course, the mitigation that you put in place to deal with it. One of the things that came up, Des made reference to the Erskine Bridge. The FETA have arrangements for handling separate closure for high-sided vehicles when required, and I'm sure that FETA's professionals will continue to manage the bridge as effectively after abolition as they have before. Alec Johnson quite properly referred to perhaps an early thought in motorist minds that the tolls may have been abolished. I can assure him that FETA have a strategy that will go into operation this very night and continue as long as necessary to deal with a misapprehension that the passing of the bill immediately leads to the lifting of the tolls. Alison McInnes talked about ferry toll. Absolutely vital. We fully support it. You will have seen reference in yesterday's announcement to continue to support for that. I would say that the investment we're making in public transport over the next 3 years dwarfs the cost of abolishing the tolls. And in relation to the Tay Bridge debt, that will actually be repaid at the end of January. So I can give assurance that that's provided for in the current budgets. I hope that John Part will forgive me if I don't go on at length on the Rosyth bypasses. It's clearly ultra vires, but I have had some very preliminary discussions with Fife on the subject. And Jim Tolson, our plans over the piece should deliver an extra 1,000 places on trains across from Fife. The Bridge boards put in place new traffic management arrangements, new signage and temporary works where necessary that will allow the transition to the free crossing. And I'm understand that the bridges are working on the assumption that all the necessary steps will be in place to allow tolls to end around the first weekend in February. I believe that's a reasonable assumption, although it clearly depends on matters like the Royal Assent, which I cannot influence the timetable of. And as I said to Helen Eady in the Stage 1 debate on the 15th of November, I will sign the commencement order on the very first day I'm able to do so and give the smallest gap to actual implementation that is consistent with the advice I get from the boards as to what we can do. Presiding Officer, I believe there's a clear, if not absolutely total, consensus on the bill, both amongst members and amongst those outside this Parliament who travel on our roads and bridges. I trust that Parliament will support the motion in favour of this bill when we come to decision time tonight.